The wind howled through the skeletal trees, their bare branches clawing at the moonlit sky. The forest was unnaturally silent, save for the crunch of leaves beneath Emma's boots. She shouldn't have taken the shortcut. She shouldn't have ignored the warnings. But the promise of a warm bed and a hot meal had clouded her judgment. Now she was lost, and the forest felt alive, watching, waiting. The first sign that something was wrong came when she noticed the trees. Their bark was blackened, as if scorched, yet they stood tall and unyielding. The air smelled faintly of rot, a sweet, cloying stench that made her stomach churn. She quickened, her pace, her breath visible in the cold night air. Her flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced like specters around her. Then she heard it, a low, guttural growl, like the sound of wet stones grinding together. It came from behind her. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly she turned, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The beam illuminated nothing but the endless rows of blackened trees. The growl came again, closer this time, and she swore she felt hot breath on the back of her neck. She ran. Branches lashed at her face and roots threatened to trip her, but she didn't stop. The growl turned into a chorus echoing from all directions, as if the forest itself were hunting her. Her flashlight died, plunging her into darkness. She stumbled, falling to her knees, her hands sinking into something wet and warm. The stench of decay overwhelmed her, and she gagged. When she looked up, she saw it. A figure stood a few feet away, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. It was tall, too tall, its limbs elongated and twisted at unnatural angles. Its head was a featureless void, smooth and black like polished obsidian. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but she could feel its gaze on her, cold and unrelenting. Emma scrambled to her feet, her legs trembling. She backed away, her eyes locked on the figure. It didn't follow, but the growling grew louder, more insistent. She turned and ran again, her lungs burning, her legs screaming in protest. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees closing in around her, their branches forming a cage. She burst into a clearing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. In the center of the clearing stood a house. It was old, its wooden planks warped and splintered, its windows shattered. The door hung open, swaying gently in the wind. She hesitated, but the growling was right behind her now, so close she could feel the vibrations in her chest. She ran inside. The interior was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew and something worse. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she moved deeper into the house. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she saw the walls were covered in strange symbols carved deep into the wood. They pulsed faintly as if alive. A sound made her freeze, a soft, wet squelching like something dragging itself across the floor. She turned slowly, her breath caught in her throat. In the corner of the room, a shape moved. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs too long, its skin pale and translucent like a grub pulled from the earth. Its face was a twisted mockery of a human's, its mouth a gaping maw filled with rows of needle-like teeth. It saw her. With a guttural screech, it lunged, its movements jerky and unnatural. Emma screamed, turning to run, but the door slammed shut behind her. She pounded on it, her fists bruising against the wood, but it wouldn't budge. The creature was on her in seconds, its cold, slimy hands wrapping around her throat. She struggled, clawing at its face, but its skin was like rubber, unyielding and slick. Its mouth opened wider, impossibly wide, and she saw something moving inside. A mass of writhing, worm-like tendrils. They reached for her, squirming and pulsating, and she felt them brush against her skin. They were cold, so cold, and they burned where they touched her. She screamed again, but no sound came out. The tendrils burrowed into her mouth, her nose, her ears, filling her, hollowing her out. When it was over, the creature released her and she crumpled to the floor. She could feel them inside her, moving, twisting, consuming her from within. Her body convulsed, her limbs twitching uncontrollably. She tried to scream, but her voice was gone, replaced by a low guttural growl. The door creaked open and the figure from the forest stepped inside. It loomed over her, its featureless head tilting as if studying her. She wanted to beg, to plead, but the words wouldn't come. The figure reached down, its long, spindly fingers brushing against her face. Its touch was like ice, and she felt something shift inside her, something breaking.